July 19, 1969. As Apollo 11 makes its final approach to the moon, mysterious lights appear, dazzling the astronauts.
Even the harshest critic discovered the fact that this was real. They actually did see something.
NASA thinks it's moon debris.
It had to be something else. It really is a mystery.
Is there something there they don't want the public to know?
Just hours before NASA astronauts take man's first steps on the moon, astronomers in Germany report a strange light coming from the Aristarchus crater.
Apollo 11, this is Houston, go ahead.
Mission Control immediately asks the astronauts to investigate.
There have been some lunar transient events reported in the vicinity of Aristarchus. Over.
Okay, Houston, I'm looking north up toward Aristarchus now.
You take a look and see if you see anything worth noting up there. Over.
What Apollo 11 sees defies explanation.
There's an area there that is considerably more illuminated than the surroundings.
The Apollo astronauts see this glow in this crater.
11, this is Houston. Can you discern any difference in color of the illumination?
No, it doesn't appear to be any color involved in it, Bruce.
They're having this conversation back and forth with Capcom, and they mention it. Suddenly, there's interference, there's static, and then there's silence.
The live mission broadcast disappears for 89 tenth seconds.
Is NASA deliberately cutting out a public feed because they didn't want us to know that something is on the moon that shouldn't be?
NASA astronaut Charles Duke doesn't think so. He was part of the shift at Mission Control in the hours immediately following the incident.
Can you give us a status report, please?
I was the only guy talking to them for 8 hours till we landed on the moon. I don't remember any big discussion about transients.
Is there something there they don't want the public to know?
It's an issue that's fascinated lunar scientist Peter Schultz for decades.
I saw something on the moon many years, 40, 50 years ago, and realized it's very dangerous to publish anything about this. It was terribly controversial, it could ruin a career.
NASA calls these sightings transient lunar phenomena, TLP for short.
TLP could be something other than natural.
There are a lot of transient events on the moon, but I can't comment specifically.
Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off. And if it's artificial, that would belie all the stories about the moon being a dead celestial body.
NASA's official position is that Aristarchus glistens because it contains reflective dust. But Peter Schultz claims the sun wasn't in the right place to reflect off the crater when Apollo 11 saw it.
Aristarchus was in the nighttime when the astronauts from Apollo 11 went over it. So it can't be a glint off the sun. It had to be something else. It really is a mystery.
Solar glint remains NASA's official explanation, although not everyone agrees.
People were fired because of people trying to look for those transient phenomena. Amazing. So all these reports, all these astronomers who said they saw something and nobody believed them, they were probably right.
Aristarchus was the first of many sightings that make moon watchers think there's more to our nearest neighbor than meets the eye.
Even today, there are people who think that there might be artifacts on the moon, things left by societies. I mean, think of the movie 2001. There's a big monolith on the moon.
Earth's moon may still hide secrets, but Mars's largest moon might itself be the biggest mystery in the solar system.
The data that we retrieved from Phobos makes it seem as though Phobos is hollow.
There have been thoughts that it might be the remnants of a huge space station.
If that were true, holy cow, that changes everything.
Small, fast, and impossibly low. Phobos streaks just 5,800 miles above the surface of Mars, and its orbit is shrinking. Astronomers calculate that Phobos will collide with the planet in the next 10 million years, a blink of an eye in astronomical time. And that poses some difficult questions.
In astronomy, you have something will only last for 10 million years. It's not from the formation of the solar system. It's something more recent. How do you get that more recent thing? How did Phobos get captured into an orbit around Mars?
In 1958, Russian astrophysicist Yosef Shklovsky asked the same thing. When he measured the orbital velocity of Phobos, he made an astonishing discovery. To his surprise, the moon changes speed, but there was more.
It was his investigation, his research into Phobos that suggested the idea that Phobos was hollow. And that is so tantalizing for experts at NASA that that's really one of the reasons we were driven to Mars, just to explore the possibility that Mars had a hollow moon.
Because if Phobos is hollow, that opens up a whole new set of possibilities.
If indeed it's hollow, that certainly means somebody put it up.
Why would you even want to build a hollow moon in Mars orbit anyway? A refueling station? A jumping off point?
If I were involved in setting priorities for NASA, I would be interested in Phobos too.
NASA's budget, a lot of that budget is a black budget. It's a secret budget. It's doing missions for the military and doing missions for the intelligence agency. But maybe, just maybe, one of those missions has to be to explore celestial bodies, moons, that are actually hollow on the inside.
Whoever gets to Phobos first may stand to win points with whatever intelligence put it up.
Landing on Phobos is a massive technological hurdle that no human agency has so far managed to jump.
Interesting that every time we try to send something to Phobos, it fails for some reason. Maybe something's stopping us from getting there.
Perhaps our first successful mission to Phobos will signify a major milestone for humankind and anyone else who's watching. But astronomer J.J. Cavallars is not convinced that Phobos is artificial.
When we do spectroscopy of Phobos' surface, we see that it's made from the same sort of thing as the asteroids are made from. So this gives a pretty good indication of where it's coming from. If it was a more exotic material, you would detect that.
If Phobos is an asteroid, how can it be hollow?
Phobos is basically made up of a bunch of boulders and loosely aggregated dust. And so there's lots of voids, space, between the rocks. And so the density of the object itself is really quite low compared to the rocks that it's made from.
NASA believes that over billions of years, the pull of gravity has drawn bits of orbital debris together. Phobos is just a big pile of rocks.
Definitely not a space station. Phobos is not a space station.
But that doesn't mean that Phobos can't become a great space station. It is perfectly located to be the base from which we can explore Mars, possibly occupy Mars. If Phobos isn't a space station yet, don't worry, it will be.
Something appears to be shadowing the astronauts of the Apollo 17 mission.
You see this very, very thin rectangular image that's kind of hovering, seemingly almost flying.
Is it something watching the astronauts?
We got to pull out.
What is this thing that's flying above the lunar landscape?
Was this a warning? Stay off the moon. It's not yours, it's ours.
This has got to be one of the most proud moments of my life, I guarantee you.
December 14th, 1972. Apollo 17 astronauts Eugene Cernan and Jack Schmitt are planting explosives on the moon.
The astronauts set up a network of seismometers on the lunar surface, and these impacts would give you clues to the interior of the moon.
The explosives are part of a geological experiment which will profile the upper crust of the moon. Before the astronauts leave, Cernan takes some last-minute photographs. Years later, one of the photographs catches the attention of astronomer Jim Scotty.
So I'm looking at these images, and I see the mostly black sky, but I see a little streak up in the top part of the image. I start thinking about what sort of natural phenomena or man-made phenomena we're actually seeing in the sky.
What is this strange, small, rectangular shape that we're seeing flying above the lunar surface? Is it some kind of craft, or what else could it be? Is there something out there watching us while we're walking on the lunar surface?
When I see something that I can't quite recognize right away, you can sort of take the scientific approach, or you can jump to conclusions, and I prefer the scientific approach. I look at the print, the higher resolution print, and I can see the shape, and it gives me an idea of...
Okay, Bob, I've got my tools of the trade right here.
Scotty thinks the solution lies with Jack Schmitt. NASA picked him for the Apollo 17 crew because of his background as a geologist.
Let's see if I can't crack the corner and get that contact.
Jack Schmitt was the first scientist astronaut to walk on the moon, the only geologist, even today, that has ever walked on the moon.
It's obviously very cohesive.
We need to know a great deal more about the variation of the concentration of different minerals. They want to know in detail, where's the good stuff?
I can see it from here. It's orange. That is really orange.
The astronauts spot telltale signs of titanium and other exotic minerals. They are eager to continue their survey.
There isn't enough time, Tony. We need more time.
They got to leave at a certain time regardless of what we got.
Running low on oxygen, they must end the spacewalk. Just before they head back to the module, Cernan asks the mission's geologist an odd question.
Gene Cernan says, "Can I throw the hammer? Are we done with it?"
Let me throw the hammer.
Jack says, "Can I throw the hammer? I'm the geologist."
You're a geologist, you got to be able to throw. You ready? Go ahead.
Scotty thinks this conversation is the key to unlocking the mystery of the anomaly in Cernan's photographs.
Most likely, these three images were taken by Gene Cernan, who was carrying a camera with black and white film. And it's very consistent with him taking some images of the hammer in flight. Mystery solved.
This closes a golden chapter in the age of space exploration.
Mankind never returned to the moon. The Apollo 12 mission ends with humanity's first deliberate spaceship crash.
We jettisoned the lunar module. It impacted the moon at just the right spot.
And the scientists monitoring the impact get the surprise of their lives.
This is weird. It doesn't make sense. It's ringing like a bell.
Once you go down the path of a hollow moon, everything is on the table.
Stepping out from the lunar module, Apollo 12 astronauts Pete Conrad and Alan Bean become the third and fourth members of humanity to set foot on another world.
This is amazing. This is science fiction, except you're living it. We knew we'd been sent there for a job, so I looked at the cuff checklist and see what was to do next.
One of the mission's primary objectives is an experiment to reveal the moon's geological makeup. Crashing part of the Apollo 12 spacecraft should send measurable vibrations through the lunar crust.
Scientists said, let's separate the lunar module and have it impact the moon just at the right distance away from this seismometer that they put there, and we'll measure how it vibrates, and that'll tell us what's going on in the center of the moon.
The experiment begins with the installation of a seismometer, a highly sensitive device to detect tiny movements in the moon's surface and the rocks deep below.
The first thing it measured on there was us running near it. They could catch our feet.
Pete and Al, we're picking up your heavy footprints going by the seismometer.
For the next 31 hours, this geology experiment remains on hold while the astronauts focus on other work, including construction of a nuclear-powered science station on the lunar surface. The experiment resumes when the ascent stage blasts into orbit to rendezvous with the command module.
Once the lunar module ascent stage docks with the command service module and they transfer all the personnel and the material into the command module, the ascent stage becomes virtually useless.
The abandoned spacecraft becomes a missile under the control of technicians in Houston.
Guidance and control officer reports that the two spacecraft have separated.
The lunar module ascent stage is targeted to land about 40 to 50 miles away from the Apollo 12 landing site.
Apollo 12 Houston, the LEM is on its way down.
Traveling at almost 3,800 miles per hour, the used vehicle slams into the moon's surface, creating a 30-foot wide crater and a moonquake.
It impacted the moon at just the right spot so our seismometer could measure what the interior of the moon was like.
The results recorded on the seismic sensors astonished NASA scientists.
When they saw them on the seismic record, it was ringing like a bell. It just wouldn't stop. It was just amazing. They had not seen something like that before. They wondered, what the devil is this?
When Maurice Ewing, co-head of the seismic experiment, starts the science press conference 30 minutes later, the moon is still ringing.
As for the meaning of it, I'd rather not make an interpretation right now, but it is as though one had struck a bell, say, in the belfry of the church, a single blow, and found that the reverberation from it continued.
The moonquake caused by this single impact continues for another 25 minutes.
This, of course, set off a search to try to find an explanation for what this big difference between what we see on Earth, where the earthquakes only last for a few minutes, and on the moon, where they go on for hours and hours.
Scientists who were willing to think outside the box said, hey, that's hollow. We have a hollow moon. Once you go down the path of a hollow moon, everything is on the table.
So if the moon were hollow, what would that mean? Well, obviously it's not a naturally occurring phenomenon, so it's got to be artificial. Somebody put it there, someone built it.
First men in the moon.
Theories about our moon being hollow have become common in science fiction stories, but don't fit with mainstream science.
The idea that the moon could be an artificial space station, how difficult it is just to get our space station up. Can you imagine putting something the size of the moon in orbit? I don't think so. It has a bigger story.
NASA scientists have theorized that the unexpected vibrations come from low levels of water in the moon's crust.
The Earth is a water-rich planet. We have water covering the surface, but there's also lots of water that's been buried deep inside the Earth's mantle.
When you have an earthquake, the water in the Earth absorbs that signal very quickly, like shock absorbers.
But on the moon, there's much less water on the surface, and then also very little water inside the interior of the moon.
Without the water, makes it keep on ringing.
The idea of a hollow moon remains science fiction. At least for now. A series of revolutionary Soviet lunar probes disappear as they approach unexplored territory.
Everything cuts out. Bam! Nothing.
When one of the probes finally returns to Earth, scientists uncover unsettling evidence that something else got to the moon first.
What could it have been?
I really wonder if the Germans could have gotten to the moon. Actually, I think they could have.
– 3:17 p.m., July 20th, 1969. When the Apollo 11 astronauts become the first people in history to set foot on another world.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Russia suffers a crushing defeat in the battle to conquer space.
When Armstrong and Aldrin landed on the moon, I think the Russians were devastated. I think that was a big blow to them.
But just 3 days before the American landing, the Russian attempt to upstage their American rivals appears to be going well. As the unmanned Soviet probe, codenamed Luna 15, arrives in lunar orbit.
While Luna 15 isn't a manned mission, it is a big step in lunar exploration and should put the Soviets back in a strong position.
Luna 15's flight plan calls for landing on a mysterious area of the moon known as the Sea of Crises. The probe's mission is to drill into the surface and beat the Apollo astronauts back to Earth with mankind's first samples of moon rock.
Everything seems to be going fine. But then 4 minutes into the descent, everything cuts out. Bam! Nothing.
5 years later, the Russians make another attempt to return to the same area with Luna 23. But the second craft also crashes and fails to bring back any rocks from the Sea of Crises. Despite the setbacks, the Russian Space Agency launches another probe, hoping that it can beat the odds and avoid whatever caused its predecessors to fail.
Luna 24 follows very soon after Luna 23, lands just a couple of miles away. The Russians aren't giving up on this one.
Luna 24 succeeds where the previous Russian missions failed, returning to Earth with a precious sample from the unexplored region.
The sample of lunar soil brought back weighs less than 0.7 of a pound, but has a big impact on the Soviets' understanding of lunar geology.
The results of the analysis shock Soviet geologists.
It looked like something had happened to the soil in an area of the moon that was supposedly undisturbed for billions of years. What could it have been?
Tests on the sample confirm that the soil used to be buried deep underground. Someone or something brought it to the surface.
The Soviets know that the Americans haven't been to this part of the moon. They think this is their turf. So they have to face up to the question, who the heck's been disturbing the lunar surface here?
Could someone else have landed on the moon before the US and Russia?
I have heard that the Germans developed a moon rocket before they were defeated in 1945.
We know for a fact from NASA's own records, the Germans had a very advanced space exploration program.
The Nazis were leaders in the rocketry industry. And they had people like Wernher von Braun.
German aerospace engineer Wernher von Braun is the founding father of rocket science.
Wernher von Braun was a genius. May have been a Nazi, but he was a genius.
And was able to design systems that, to this day, are still astounding to us.
During World War II, the Nazi regime asked von Braun to develop the V-2 rocket, the first man-made craft to reach space. NASA and their Russian counterparts both know that this Nazi superweapon was a key step in the development of their own moon rockets.
We would not have been able to land on the moon if it hadn't been for the Germans. Damn right.
The first American rocket was based on V-2 technology. The first Russian rocket was essentially just a V-2. How difficult is it to believe that the Nazis pushed their technology just that little bit further?
I really wonder if the Germans could have gotten to the moon. Actually, I think they could have.
Nazi technology may have had the potential to reach the moon, but there is no evidence to suggest that a German spacecraft disturbed the dust of the Sea of Crises. In 2011, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter sheds new light on the mystery of the Luna 24 probe.
Against all odds, Luna 24 landed in the vicinity of the crater.
The image from the LRO reveals that by pure chance, Luna 24's landing spot was at the edge of a crater from an asteroid impact that released rock from deep underground.
The Soviets were hoping this would be a perfect landing site, but nobody knows what the lunar geology is going to be until they actually land.
So the Luna 24 sample that seemed like freshly disturbed dirt was the result of geology rather than Nazi technology.
If the probe had returned a sample from anywhere else, the moon dirt would have tested normal.
The discovery of a crater solves the mystery of Luna 24's strange sample. But the fate of the other Soviet probes remains unexplained.
Apollo 10, 2 minutes to LOS.
Apollo 10 loses contact with mission control and encounters an unidentified radio signal.
I don't know what the hell that was. It's really weird.
There was something there.
When the mission returns to Earth, all records of the incident are classified.
The tapes reveal conversations between the astronauts about a phenomenon that they did not report to mission control.
What the hell happened? Dave, I don't know.
May 18th, 1969. Apollo 10 prepares for launch from the Kennedy Space Center.
40 seconds and counting. Tom Stafford making a final check of his computer.
Apollo 10 basically ran a dress rehearsal for Apollo 11's lunar landing.
Launch commenced. Liftoff. We have liftoff.
They did everything Apollo 11 would do short of landing on the moon's surface. This was the most complicated mission to date.
Apollo 10, this is Houston. You're halfway, over.
Apollo 10 enters lunar orbit. As they pass around the far side of the moon, the astronauts lose all contact with Earth.
It's about an hour on the backside of the moon, away from Earth, where you lose radio contact.
During this hour, the astronauts are on their own. No one on Earth can see or hear them. When they emerge, they seem to have survived their voyage around the far side unscathed.
Houston, you can tell the world that we have arrived.
As far as anyone on Earth knows, this mission is going like clockwork. Everything according to plan. There's nothing irregular going on at all.
But nearly 4 decades later, lost recordings emerge revealing an unsettling incident on the far side of the moon.
There are recorders that record whatever's going on the backside, and then you do a data dump when you come around the front side. And Houston or Mission Control then can see what happened when you were around the backside.
After the NASA astronauts return to Earth,
Roger, Houston, we are returning to the Earth. Over.
NASA transcribes the tapes, then buries them in the archives without comment.
These conversations are recorded in the transcripts, but those transcripts were classified.
NASA would withhold information from the public if they thought it was in the public's best interest.
Even after declassification, the transcripts lay undiscovered in the NASA archives until 2008.
Finding record of this conversation is like finding a needle in a haystack. It takes years to come to light.
The tapes contain recordings of strange, otherworldly music coming through the Apollo module's radio. The conversations that follow the sounds makes it clear they are unlike anything the astronauts have ever heard.
That music even sounds outer spacey, doesn't it? Do you hear that? That whistling sound?
In their headsets, it sounded like a woo-woo kind of a noise.
Sounds like, outer space-type music.
If I were to hear something back there, the first thing probably would freak me out.
Boy, that sure is weird music.
Over the course of an hour, they mention it multiple times. This is not just some anomaly. This is something that they're all really hearing, and it's really weird.
The astronauts struggle to identify the cause of the strange sounds.
The sounds that the astronauts heard could not be coming from the planet Earth because they're on the far side of the moon, out of contact with the Earth.
I'll tell you, John, that music is really weird. I know it. No one will believe it.
This was the far side of the moon. For all they knew, anything could have been down there. Could this be an alien signal? Is that what we're hearing?
After almost an hour of transmission, the sound stops.
Boy, it got quiet, didn't it?
Before they re-enter radio contact with Earth, the astronauts discuss whether to report their experience to Mission Control.
Who's gonna believe it? Nobody. Shall we tell them about it? I don't know. We ought to think about it.
The Apollo 10 sounds remain a mystery for decades, until another NASA probe uncovers a possible clue to their nature.
The Cassini spacecraft picked up broadcasts like this from Saturn.
These noises, some of them are really weird. They even sound, under some conditions, like strange alien speech.
For the sounds from Saturn, there is a scientific explanation.
These are caused by charged particles moving through Saturn's magnetic environment.
Imagine being on the backside of the moon, all alone, away from the Earth, and hearing these kinds of sounds. I can understand how they could have been unnerved.
But the unsettling noises the Apollo 10 astronauts heard could not be caused by magnetic field.
The moon doesn't have an atmosphere or a magnetic field, so we wouldn't expect it to be making any transmissions that could be picked up on a radio.
Since the sounds can't be from the moon, NASA's radio technicians come up with their own theory.
The radios in the two spacecraft were interfering with each other. They were on VHF, and there was a bit of radio interference, and that was the source of the sound.
But Apollo astronaut Al Warden doesn't agree with the radio theory.
The Apollo 10 crew is very used to the kind of noise that they should be hearing. Logic tells me that if there was something recorded on there, then there was something there.
Well, I don't know what the hell that was, babe.
The Apollo 10 astronauts never publicly discussed what they heard.
If you're an astronaut and you start hearing these strange sounds, what are you going to do? They were all absolutely petrified of being grounded if there was even the slightest question mark over their state of mind. So what did? They stayed silent.
To date, The origin of the noises mentioned in the Apollo 10 recordings remains a mystery.
I suspect there's a very, very clear cause of what they heard on Apollo 10, which maybe we haven't uncovered yet. I just think we don't understand it.
Apollo 12 astronauts returned to Earth, carrying an unexpected payload.
There is something alive on those cameras.
Scientists and astronauts struggled to explain the mystery.
At the time, it was thought that space was an instantly lethal environment.
Had they just discovered life on the moon?
November 19th, 1969. Apollo 12 becomes the second manned spacecraft to approach the lunar surface.
I got some kind of a horizon out there. I got some craters too, but I don't know where I am yet.
I thought, where are we going to land? There's no room to land. And then we waited for these probes to illuminate, which were about 5 feet below the landing pad. I said, contact light.
Contact light. Roger, copy contact.
And then Pete touched down, and I thought, wow, this is the moon. We're really here.
Apollo 12 was the second manned lunar landing mission, and one of the goals of this mission was to recover hardware from the Surveyor 3 probe that had landed 2 years earlier, and see just what the lunar environment did to something that was exposed to the surface for that long.
The two astronauts, Alan Bean and Pete Conrad, conduct a thorough inspection of Surveyor 3.
They had been in space longer than any other space hardware. The thing they wanted the most was the television camera, because the television camera had metals in it, it had a lot of different materials, and they could then look at the effect of radiation, temperature change, and all this.
This is important stuff, because if you're ever going to build a base on the moon, you know, some sort of colonization effort, you need to know, is dust going to get into everything? What about the fact that there's no air on the outside? What about the extremes of temperature? So it's, of course, important to know how your own equipment is performed.
10 days after leaving Earth, the astronauts return, carrying with them the equipment recovered from Surveyor 3. When scientists examine the camera, they find something disturbing.
Investigators took a look at this camera and sampled it for microbial growth, and surprisingly, got growth from one of 33 locations that they sampled.
They find something alive on a camera that's been on the surface of the moon for more than 2 years.
The thought at the time is that the space environment was the extreme possibility for life, that there was nothing that could survive in space. Exposed to space, everything would die.
Space, as we know it, is inhospitable. There's no water, solar radiation flare, shouldn't see anything, but it's there. So the question that remains now is this organism terrestrial or extraterrestrial?
The organism resembles a well-known Earth life form.
The organism that was found was a streptococcus-type organism, which is similar to organisms you've got all over your body, and that when you're not feeling well, they'll take the opportunity to cause disease.
But the scientists who found the organism know of no form of human life capable of surviving in the hostile environment of space.
The obvious question is, well, how did it get here? Where did it come from?
One explanation for what happened here is that, in fact, these bacteria were just the result of contamination that occurred when this instrument was brought back to Earth.
A NASA scientist who worked on the Surveyor program claims to have identified an incident which could have contaminated the samples.
The videos of this sampling, looking at those, I saw an impossible situation in terms of limiting contamination. Not only did the investigators pick up sampling equipment, hold it against their bare arms, and put it back again, one investigator actually breathes on the camera area that they were going to sample.
But both current and former NASA scientists reject the contamination hypothesis.
I believe that is absolutely and completely, totally incorrect. Tremendous care was taken with this camera because nobody knew what it contained. They had made tremendous plans to do a detailed study of the camera as it was disassembled. and to look at every part to see if there was any possibility that any kind of microorganisms might be present.
The presence of only one kind of organism makes contamination after Apollo 12's return seem unlikely.
They only found Streptococcus mitis. Now, if they had contaminated that camera while they were working, you cannot sneeze and produce only Streptococcus mitis. You're going to have all sorts of different microorganisms. There are about 750 million bacteria in every tiny drop of spittle.
It is really not a plausible explanation that the contamination came in after it had been brought back to Earth.
If the life form on the camera is terrestrial and not the result of contamination, the only possible conclusion is that it must have somehow traveled to the moon.
Someone who was assembling the camera may have sneezed or coughed and got Earth-human microorganisms into the camera lens area, and then it went to the moon. Now, why would they just find one microorganism on the moon? Well, the answer is very simple. Most of them died. But this little hardy beggar called Streptococcus mitis decided that it didn't want to die, and so it just sat there and stayed there on the surface of the moon for 2.5 years before the Apollo 12 astronauts came and got it.
Scientists theorize that to survive the hazards of the lunar surface, the organism must have entered some kind of suspended animation.
When they tried to get these bacteria to grow again, they were kind of reluctant. It took a long time for them to get back up to speed.
If a microorganism's on the moon and has gone into a deeply dormant state to survive the vacuum, the cold, and the low-level radiation, then when it finds itself back on Earth in good conditions, it's going to take it longer to wake up and longer to get back into full metabolic action.
If the life form discovered on Surveyor really is something from Earth that has survived in space, the implications are staggering.
The possibility that microorganisms could remain alive on the surface of the moon for 2.5 years is tremendously important to science, because that means basically that microorganisms could conceivably be transported in space from one body to another.
So our idea of how life spreads has to be reoriented based on this. Life is not confined to planets.
An Apollo 17 photograph captures a strange triangle on the moon.
Suddenly, out of a dark space, you start to see what looks like a pyramid.
And recently declassified documents reveal U.S. military plans for a secret lunar construction project.
A military space program captured on camera.
It sounds crazy, but it's there in black and white.
NASA was founded as a civilian agency for the peaceful exploration of space. But the space agency's ties to the U.S. military have always been close. December 1972.
Okay, stand by for pitch over. So are we coming in?
The Apollo 17 lunar module touches down in an unexplored region of the moon known as the Taurus-Littrow Valley.
Apollo 17 was the last manned mission to the moon. It was going into dark territory.
This has got to be one of the most proud moments of my life.
Geologist Harrison Schmitt is the first and to date only scientist to set foot on the lunar surface.
We were very aware that this was the last of the Apollo missions. We did an awful lot of taking pictures.
With 4 cameras, they captured thousands of images of a place never before seen by human eyes.
Based on the photography we had at the time, the Apollo photographs are really quite remarkable.
Some of the images they take become iconic. Others fade into obscurity for decades.
Every now and then, a photo shows up that really stands out as odd. This is one of them.
In 2008, amateur investigators uncover one image from Apollo 17 that seems blank until they look closer.
Suddenly, out of a dark space, you start to see what looks like a pyramid.
Image analyst Mark D'Antonio has studied the mystifying photograph.
Here's the faint outline that looks like the pyramid. Now, we can actually modify this photo, increase the contrast and change some parameters. Now, we see this a little more clearly. Whatever is that?
We seem to have photographic evidence suggesting pyramidal structures on the moon.
How could there be artificial structures on the moon, and who or what would be capable of putting them there?
An intriguing explanation comes in July 2014, when the U.S. military declassifies a dossier of top-secret documents. One of them is a 118-page report called Project Horizon. It reveals a detailed plan to build a fortress on the moon.
This is one of the greatest Cold War stories that we've ever heard.
An official document showing intentions to put a military base on the moon.
The plan is the brainchild of a U.S. Army general, Arthur Trudeau. In 1959, he submits the document for Pentagon approval.
He says, imagine what it would be like for us in the United States if the Soviet Union military could rain missiles down on the United States from the moon. No, this cannot be. We must fortify the moon first.
We've got a U.S. Army document saying that the establishment of a lunar base should be as much of a priority as the Manhattan Project was during World War II. That's incredible. When the U.S. military makes something a priority like they did with the Manhattan Project, there's really nothing they can't do.
Trudeau writes that it can be done in just 7 years.
The conclusion says that the United States can establish an operational lunar outpost by 1966. You have to ask, how far did this project go?
Officially, the Senate refuses to fund Trudeau's ambitious plan.
What we know, or believe we know, is that Project Horizon was shelved. It never happened. What if that's not true?
At the same time that NASA is flying its final missions to the moon, the U.S. military is building highly classified pyramid structures on Earth. The Nakoma missile site in North Dakota was home to 46 nuclear warheads. Could this technology be transplanted to the moon?
It's right there in black and white. There are no known technical barriers to the establishment of a manned base on the moon.
A secret military moon base could have offered a decisive advantage in the Cold War.
The idea of putting a base on the moon would make sense. It's a very typically military idea, a place from which we might be able to bombard our enemies on Earth with nuclear weapons.
The declassified documents provide a compelling vision of a military moon base, but detailed analysis of the Apollo 17 picture refutes the idea that the base ever got beyond the planning stage. The pyramid photograph is one of a series of photos taken consecutively.
If we look at others in the sequence, we also see shapes like this. Here's a square piece right there.
Seen in context, there is only one conclusion.
This is a piece of the lunar rover.
The pyramid appears to be just a dark shadow across the seat of the rover.
With Apollo 17, we had to deploy the lunar rover. We drove for a total of about 32 kilometers.
These are all part of the same sequence. One is just a badly taken, underexposed photo.
The Project Horizon base never became a reality, but NASA has not given up on the idea of a permanent presence on the moon.
This is something we can do. We know we can do it. It's just a matter of when. NASA commissioned a new study in July 2015 to look at the feasibility of establishing a permanent lunar outpost. What they found is that best case, the outpost wouldn't be finished until 2030. So we're a long way off.
NASA takes unprecedented steps to ensure the safety of the first manned mission to the moon.
What is an acceptable level of risk?
But recently uncovered documents reveal the space agency's secret plans, preparing for disaster.
We didn't think the first attempt would ever make it.
Spring 1969, NASA makes the final preparations for mankind's first voyage to the moon.
The clock was ticking. You had to reach there to achieve John F. Kennedy's mandate by the end of the decade, sometime in 1969.
NASA does not greenlight the mission to put a man on the moon until every part of the spacecraft is rated 99.9% reliable.
Everything that the astronauts did had been carefully thought out well in advance to minimize the risk.
But members of NASA's astronaut corps have their own private fears.
The feeling amongst the astronaut corps was that there's a big chance that they might not make it.
The vehicle starting to pressurize. We are go for Apollo 11.
Recently declassified documents suggest NASA was fully prepared for things to go wrong. They contain a speech for the president to deliver if the mission ended in tragedy.
William Safire, president's speechwriter, wrote a speech. That speech talked about the heroic astronauts and how they've given their life for the cause of exploration. It was a very finely crafted speech.
These brave men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, know that there is no hope for their recovery. But they also know that there is hope for mankind in their sacrifice.
The president's staff wrote this speech for what NASA considered to be the most likely disaster scenario. 2 astronauts landing on the moon, but never returning.
You're faced with astronauts who are on the surface and are alive and are there until they run out of oxygen.
People would look at the moon at night and realize 2 dead American astronauts were on the lunar surface forever.
Despite all of NASA's careful preparation, the nightmare scenario outlined in the presidential speech almost came true.
Once they got into the mission, it was fairly straightforward until they went to the landing.
As they enter the final stages of the descent, Armstrong and Aldrin realize there's a problem with the planned landing site.
The automated landing system is going to bring them down in a rocky field.
The minute that Neil saw these boulders, the question was, can he find a place to land?
Contact with a boulder could damage one of the module's landing legs.
If one of those legs breaks, we're sunk, because we probably can't launch off the moon from there. That's the end of it.
Armstrong disengages the automated controls and manually pilots the module to a new landing site. But the diversion burns up valuable fuel.
He was coming close to running out of gas.
For the astronauts to survive the mission, they must land with enough fuel remaining for takeoff.
He's got a minute of fuel remaining, period.
They are seconds away from the exact scenario NASA most feared.
We were all thinking the odds are not good.
We're starting to time it, and he's trying to find a place. He's not talking.
Mission Control is less than a minute away from ordering an abort when Armstrong executes a perfect touchdown.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
They just keep going until they touch down. They did a great job.
Hello, Neil and Buzz. This certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made from the White House.
Apollo 11's landing was a close call, just as Neil Armstrong had expected.
Neil Armstrong said he thought he only had a 50% chance of actually making the landing successfully.
No one can be certain of all the risks involved in a feat never before attempted in human history.
We all knew that a lot of luck was involved in this. There were a lot of people up in NASA headquarters that didn't want to make any more landings.
What can be said is that the risk did not deter the pioneers of space travel.
We could perish on a flight, but if we did, the good side of that is that we'd be in the history books forever.
Astronauts on the final Apollo mission make a bizarre discovery on the lunar surface.
There is orange soil.
This is radical. This was not expected.
Oh man, that's incredible.
The weird substance raises a possibility that was once unthinkable.
There might still be some kind of ancient life buried deep within the moon's soil.
December 11th, 1972. Apollo 17 astronauts Harrison Schmitt and Eugene Cernan begin their 3-day exploration of the lunar surface.
We knew that the Apollo program was ending, and we'd known that for some time, and that we would be the last mission. Now, you can't let that distract you.
On December 12th, Cernan and Schmitt explore a feature called Shorty Crater in the Taurus Littrow Lunar Valley. What they discover shocks them.
Oh, hey, there is orange soil.
It's orange soil, real orange soil, and you can hear in his voice how excited this find is making him.
It's all over. Orange. Don't move it till I see it.
The astronauts collect as much orange dirt as possible before they run out of oxygen.
There isn't enough time, Tony. We need more time.
We'd like you to leave immediately.
We got to pull out.
Schmidt's discovery baffles scientists. Some suggest a possible clue to its origin could come from here on Earth.
On the Earth, there's lots of reddish soils, and places where there's lots of rain and the water is interacting with the original rock. That produces these reddish iron oxide soils.
If oxidation has turned the dirt orange, it has astonishing implications.
Oxidation requires the presence of water. On Earth, we know that all life forms need water, so that means there could have been life on the moon.
When Schmitt returns to Earth, NASA scientists subject the orange soil to chemical analysis. They find no evidence of water. Instead, they discover the dirt was created by ancient lunar lava flows.
It turned out to be volcanic debris that had been erupted about 3.5 billion years ago.
The mystery appears to be solved. But in 2011, NASA re-examined samples of Schmidt's orange dirt using advanced molecular analysis technology. What they discover is astonishing.
Water hidden inside. This is radical. This was not expected.
The discovery of traces of water in the volcanic debris directly contradicts the accepted scientific theory about how the moon was formed.
One of the major ideas of what formed the moon is that there was a giant Mars-sized impact of the Earth. Basically ripped the Earth apart.
The theory, known as Big Splash, suggests that when the object smashed into the Earth, it threw debris out into space. This debris then merged over 100 years to form the moon.
But if it was such a big event, if it was such a collision, it should have melted and vaporized so much material. How could you have any water preserved? And yet there it is.
If the moon has subterranean water deposits, it might mean life existed there in the past. And it could enable mankind to live there in the future.
The colonization of the moon has been on the cards for a long time, and the single objection was the lack of water.
NASA's Lunar Flashlight mission is one of several aimed at investigating the possibility of mining water from the moon. The space agency hopes to use the water to create breathable air, grow food, and make rocket fuel.
If water exists, even in the form of hydrated minerals, then it is possible that we could extract this water. It's a game changer as far as moon colonization is concerned.
NASA scientists hope to establish a lunar base as early as 2022. And it could be thanks to a strange discovery made by the last humans to set foot on the moon.
As we approach liftoff from the Valley of Taurus Littrow on Apollo 17, I don't think we imagined that it would be over 50 years before somebody went back.